Garden, Kanafa's in danger and you're the only one who can save them.
Then I suppose it's time to pop some corns.
Sorry, what?
I want to use a big stalk of corn as a weapon. It's funny.
People could die.
And if I save them with the corn, you can promote me to Colonel.
Ladies, gentlemen, and
Monsters of all ages, the Flamefete Festival began a couple of days back for Monster Hunter Wilds, and with it we got one proper new weapon and one new thing that could technically be considered a weapon as you can deal damage with it, and it is capable of killing some monsters if you put a lot of time and effort into it. The first of these is the lovely return of the mighty Cornpopper gunlance, which is actually extremely interesting for two main reasons. First is that it's the only gunlance in all of Wilds that has full strong shelling instead of just slightly strong, so we'll be testing what the actual numbers are on that. It also has a big ol' unique skill called Crackling Cornpopper. This increases all shelling damage by a fair margin when your gunlance is overheated, meaning when you have used both of your wyvern fire charges and they are on cooldown, which you can tell with this specific gunlance model because the corn has some kernels popping up to vent some heat near the front. So we'll talk about the specifics of this skill with the actual numbers, then we'll talk about how it fits in along with the other gunlances. Whether it is, just the new king of all playstyles, if it's the new best gunlance in the world, if it's just the king of like a specific gunlance playstyle, or just a niche, fun, potential side grade. And then finally, we'll also be talking about the water gun gesture, and I'll go over my testing on what you can do to affect the power of the gesture, what it can accomplish, whether through how you play with it, or any skills that might affect it. First up then, let's talk Cornpopper. Starting off with the new shelling level, for reference of how things are for pre-existing levels, slightly weak shelling is around 15% weaker than the shelling attacks for normal shelling power, then slightly strong shelling is around 10% stronger than normal shelling power. Comparing normal shelling, wide gunlance, to slightly strong shelling, wide gunlance, and then now to the proper strong shelling power, wide gunlance, all at the same attack power on every test, and using the hard training dummy setting to minimize the impact of element damage as well, strong appears to be right around 9.5% more damage than slightly strong shelling power, which is likely just a rounding error, so let's say that strong is 10% more damage than slightly strong. This means that, relatively speaking, you could say that the mighty Cornpopper gunlance is equivalent attack to a gunlance that has 209 attack and slightly strong shelling power, at least for the shelling attacks. But that would leave out one really important factor. Shelling power is calculated at the end of the damage equation. It is one of the final things that is added on. It's not as simple as just a flat attack bonus that you put at the front, so calling it 209 attack is not accurate in the slightest, because it also multiplies the added attack of every other buff on your character, meaning skills and consumables as well. So that 10% extra damage can be worth quite a bit depending on how you build around it. On top of that, there's also the unique skill of the weapon itself, of course, and this one is relatively simple to test, the actually Crackling Cornpopper skill. So here's the Cornpopper gunlance with absolutely no skills affecting it, nothing like that. So minimum possible variance, hitting for 48.8. Fire off the wyvern fires to activate Crackling Cornpopper, then hit with the shelling again, and you can see it go up to 64.1. This is right around a 31.5% increase, and when testing it with the lesser upgraded version of the Cornpopper as well, I got numbers that indicated around 32.5% increase, so we'll go in the middle of those two for a nice round number of 32%, which is actually equivalent to white sharpness modifier for melee attacks, but for gunlance shells. Again, like the strong shelling power buff, because this is an overall damage multiplier of the attack, it applies at the end of damage calculations. So as a result, this actually has a lot of potential power in how it works, but it's worth noting that it of course does not apply to wyvern fire itself, as you need to have the wyvern fire charges depleted for it to be active, and it doesn't seem to apply to hits that are counted as worm stake hits either. So this literally only affects shelling damage itself. That moves us to our next question then. How does this compare to the current top gunlances, and does it do anything differently? Well, straight off the bat, you wouldn't play this weapon the way that you would a Guardian Arkveld gunlance or an Artian gunlance, because the majority of the damage from this gunlance comes from purely shelling. You want to minimize the melee hits, you want to minimize the worm stake, you want to honestly minimize the actual wyvern fire because you want them to be on cooldown as much as possible. This means you've got two playstyles that still make sense, which are just spamming shells while you move around the battlefield, because it gives you a lot of mobility and safety, and it's very easy to hit shells, especially because they ignore hit zones. Or you have the evade burst fire playstyle that I first saw from Cowslayer back after Title Update 1. So shout out to a really solid gunlance creator that really deserves some love. But this takes advantage of the fact that pressing the shelling button when you are out of ammo does a reload, and this enables a different combo. Normally, if you evade and then press the regular reloading input, you would do a slow reload that cannot be comboed into an overhead slam. It adds an extra attack in between, which is why that doesn't normally exist as a combo. It's just inefficient to do compared to the regular old full burst combos that we had in World and Rise and Sunbreak. If you evade while you are out of ammo and then press the shelling button to force an auto reload, this will instead do a quick reload, which means that you can instant combo it into overhead slam. Then you can instantly do full burst. Then you can instantly do evade, reload, overhead slam, repeat this over and over, so on and so forth. It is a really solid combo that maximizes pure shelling damage as much as possible in Monster Hunter Wilds. This combo works incredibly well for this weapon in particular, and in the right setup, it would make it competitive with the other best gunlance options in general, at least situationally. Any monster with bad hit zones, this playstyle is suddenly way better. Any monster that doesn't give you large enough openings to safely do the Wormstake Full Blast combo, this playstyle is suddenly much stronger. And importantly, regardless of meta offense, which Wormstake Full Blast still is, this one is just a safer way to play because you can just rely on shells and movement and its simplicity behind that, and then just dodge the monster, and you'll still be doing very comparable damage. It will still be quite good thanks to the mighty Cornpopper. It is now an entirely viable way to play a very heavy shelling focused gunlance build that is relatively on par with the offense on meta sets, assuming that you are willing to build the right things under it. It isn't quite as strong, but it isn't weak by any means. This isn't a build video. I haven't calculated out the absolute perfect set for it. This is just one that I put together while testing the weapon to see how it felt in action, with the important things to mention being that I'm just stacking raw attack as much as I physically can. Shells cannot crit. Shells are not affected by weapon sharpness unless you fall under a specific threshold, in which case they lose damage. So the only thing that we can do to raise the damage of the shells is pure raw attack gains. And because we have two sources of additional multiplicative scaling thanks to strong shelling power and the crackling Cornpopper skill, if you can fit enough raw attack bonuses under that, those bonuses can carry this weapon to being extremely powerful. It's not that be all end all new best gunlance. It doesn't necessarily replace the standardly accepted best gunlance playstyle, but it makes an alternate playstyle much better than it's ever been, and I know gunlance players are just itching for an excuse to press some new buttons, or in a different order at least, so go farm them corns and show the monsters who's boss. Next up, we have the water gun gesture, and you may be wondering quite simply, what affects this? Of course, the main intent of the gesture is to mess around with NPCs and the hubs, and with other players, and multiplayer as well, and it is fantastic for that. It's very silly, but it also does do damage to monsters if you hit them with it. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of it all, from a bunch of testing done with this gesture, pretty much nothing affects damage that is within player control. Skills don't matter, food skills don't matter, consumables don't matter, the weapon that you have equipped on your back, your attack power, it does not matter. The only things that you can do are things that would affect you non-offensively, like utility buffs such as evade extender and evade window, or things like stamina management. These all obviously affect you no matter what, even if your weapon is sheathed, regardless of what weapon you have, and you can use it with the water pistol as a result. But there is no stat you seem to be able to scale that will increase the damage of water gun shots. That said, that doesn't mean there's nothing to talk about here, because the water gun shots do 2 damage each in 99% of situations, with the exception being particularly water resistant or immune monsters, which take 1 damage, as you can see here on Duna. This implies that 1 damage is just true damage, or raw damage essentially, and the rest of the damage from the shot is calculated as being like water element, but the discrepancy is just so low that even with decimals, it refuses to show enough detail on the shots to see exactly what's going on under the hood, as there is likely a lot of rounding going on here, because it's just very unlikely that the difference between the training dummy, which is a 15 water hit zone, compared to the water hit zone of Duna being literally 0 because she's immune to it, and that halves the damage from 2 down to 1 for the shot, which is why I believe that 1 of the damage is just pure true damage. But then if you go the other way and hit Guardian Ebonio Dogoron in the head, and he is a 40 water hit zone, the weakest water hit zone in the game, meaning it should be more than twice as weak to water than the training tiny dummy shots were, and the damage stays exactly the same. It doesn't go up to like 3 or something like that, it's still 2. So basically, this is just really funky. At least some portion of it is true damage, and the game is just not displaying perfectly accurate numbers, even with decimals on, and insists on rounding either up to 2 damage per shot, or in rare situations, down to 1 damage per shot. That said, if we take it at face value and assume that it is also doing that when the damage actually goes into the monster, rather than like 1.5 damage or 1.6 health or whatever, it's actually 2 because it pops up at 2, then we can do a bit of math to actually work out what you can do with this. The way this gesture functions, after you summon it, you can fire 3 shots in a row, then you have to reload by pumping it. Then you can repeat this cycle. A monster is unlikely to let you just sit still blasting them, so you'll likely have to move around and stop firing the weapon to do so, which will slow it down. But if you were in a perfect world where you could stand still firing endlessly, you can fire up to 81 shots in 60 seconds. At 2 damage per shot, that means 162 damage every minute. Assuming 50-minute quest timers, then if you somehow landed at moment 1 of the quest, water gun already drawn, pointed at the monster, ready to fire, and it'll let you go without hesitation for the full timer, without ever having to move, without ever having to stop. You could technically do 8,100 damage, 8,100 damage. There are very few high rank monsters that fall within that threshold. Most monsters in high rank have more than that amount of health. I'm not even sure if there's a single tempered monster in the game that has health lower than that threshold. And again, that is an idealized situation that simply will not happen in a proper hunt. That means that the dream of hunting monsters with the water gun is not necessarily dead by any means, but it's definitely limited to a select few. At least it is in solo hunts. Multiplayer in Monster Hunter is pretty funky, because monster health scales with the amount of players that are on the quest, but not equivalently. A 4-player quest does not have monsters with 4 times the amount of health. It's much closer to around 2.4x in Monster Hunter Wilds. This means that if you have 4 players, you can output 4 times the damage, if not more than that, because only 1 player at a time can be the target of a monster's attacks, and then the other players can always keep attacking. This applies even more so with the water gun emote, as the range on it is incredibly long. So if we then apply our numbers to the situation, again, it would be a perfectly ideal training dummy level scenario, but 4 players each getting to do 8,100 damage throughout a quest timer would instead bump it up to 32,400 damage. This still isn't enough for the super high-end monsters by any means, and honestly it's still out of the realm of most tempered monsters and a good portion of high-rank monsters too, but the point of that is to say that the water gun gesture has limited potential as a full focus weapon, but there are some lower health monsters it is physically possible to kill with water gun only, and you can definitely do some more even in low rank if you want to. In multiplayer, especially with 4 players where the scaling is to the player's advantage, you can technically take down some slightly beefier beasties as well, but still up to a limit where you just couldn't physically do enough damage within the quest timer to do something like a tempered 8-star gore magala, obviously. That just about does it for today then, everyone. Full testing and results for the new mighty Cornpopper gunlance and the water gun gesture in Monster Hunter Wilds. The corn gunlance is honestly awesome. I'm really happy to see it return as one of my personal favorite weapons in the series, and in a way that is really genuinely usable as a proper weapon as well. The water gun gesture is extremely fun and silly, but maybe not quite strong enough to be treated like the Akuma playstyle as an example, which I still regularly see people bring into random hunts online and have plenty of success with it. I hope you've all enjoyed this video then, and hopefully it helps you make the best of our fun new toys. Like if you liked the video, subscribe and the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.